So yes, I'm Angie Jones. I lead AI tools in enablement at Block. Can you all hear me okay? All right, perfect. If you all would humor me for a couple of minutes, I want to ponder a bit about how MCP clients, specifically open source ones, are actually leading the movement. So open source has always been where the future starts. It's where Linux redefined operating systems. It's where Kubernetes transformed infrastructure. It's where communities built the tools that power our industry today. And now we're standing at the edge of another shift, agentic AI. And once again, it's an open protocol that is setting the trend. And MCP is quickly becoming the standard way to connect AI agents with the world around them. So most of the conversation around MCP naturally centers on servers. And that's understandable because that's how we get the actual context that we need to unlock the capabilities and give us those building blocks for agentic AI. But no matter how many servers exist, no matter how powerful and amazing they are, it's the MCP clients that determine what's possible. Servers, they provide the potential, but it's the clients that turn that potential into new realities. So take MCP UI, for example. You've heard about it several times at this conference. It's clearly the moment right now. And it's not just at this conference, it's everywhere on social media and everything. People are genuinely excited about this, and they should be, because this promises a richer, more human way to interact with our agents. But the reality is that most clients don't support it yet, which means server builders, they have less incentive to ship this, to add this to their servers. Users cannot get their hands on it. And that's a bigger pattern that I actually want to call out, because MCP UI is just one example of this larger truth where clients act as the gatekeepers, actually, of adoption, right? They decide which capabilities become usable and which ones are just going to stay as a great idea. So I want you all to pay close attention to MCP UI and its journey and its story, because it's a bigger conversation than just that one feature. This is a case study in how clients shape what MCP actually becomes in practice. Now, I can tell you one MCP client that does support MCP UI, Goose. So Goose is an open source MCP client that actually served as the reference implementation for the protocol. Our engineers at Block built Goose alongside Anthropic as they were developing MCP. And we helped shape the spec as we built out this client. So, you know, people often ask me, how is Goose different than all of the many other clients that are out there? And my answer is that Goose is truly open, with the most permissive open source license there is, and it's highly customizable, which means that the community, you all play a major part in building the agent of your dreams, right? So Goose is Apache 2.0, which means you can fork it, you can remix it, you can ship it, you can even turn it into something entirely new. And that kind of permissive licensing matters a lot, because this lowers the barrier for contributions, right? It accelerates adoption. We've seen several case studies throughout our careers, I'm sure, of what happens when a project is just open-ish or flips the switch on you, right? The community forks it, they keep moving without that vendor. With Goose, there is no hedge, there's no lock-in. It's open in the way that open source was meant to be. And that's why the community has stepped up in such a major way to make Goose their own. And because Goose is open source, it's often one of the first clients to support a new feature or introduce a new pattern to the MCP ecosystem. So take MCP UI again. Everybody wanted this, right? But the implementation actually didn't come from us. It didn't come from the Goose team. It didn't even come from an engineer, actually. It was a designer who saw the need, opened up the code, contributed some PRs, and now it's in Goose. It's real. It's one of the first ones, right? And I love that because that shows what open source really does, right? Again, it lowers that barrier so anyone can shape the ecosystem, not just the vendors, not just the core maintainers, anyone with the passion to make it better. How many of you are developers in the room? Show of hands. Oh, everybody? Okay. How many are not developers? Don't be ashamed. Okay, all right, welcome. So I shared that story to say that now with these clients, these agents, you can actually build features yourself. We often say at our company, everyone is a builder now, right? With these tools, and this just kind of proved that point. So in a closed project or a client, you would maybe file an issue requesting this. You wait, you cross your fingers, you hope and pray. You get your buddies to like vote it up. Hopefully, maybe that'll like convince the maintainers to go ahead and add it. But in an open source world, if the feature matters, the community steps in and builds it. And that's how Goose stays ahead. And that's why open source ends up setting the trend for everyone else. Now, MCP UI is not the only feature that Goose was early on. From day one, Goose was LLM agnostic. We believe that users should be free to choose whichever model they want. Amen? Amen. And that could be free models, open source ones, local, frontier models, whatever works for their use case. Now, call me a conspiracy theorist, but I get a little nervous about vendors who are controlling both the agents and the models, right? If we really think about this, I mean, if you're paying based on token usage, it's kind of in their best interest to have the client maybe take the scenic route to get your task done, you know? I don't know, just things that make you go, And I'm half joking here, but tell me that you all are not eyeing that little cost tracker, you know, as your agent gets a little chatty, you know. I know you are because you all are the ones that added that visual to Goose. But seriously, Goose supports 20 model providers, many of which of these were added by open source contributors. And this diversity is really important because this is stress testing MCP across these vendors, and it reflects the reality of the market, right? Even the cloud providers know that one model is not enough. Right now, multi-provider support has basically become table stakes. AWS Bedrock, they host Anthropic and Meta and Mistral. Azure AI Studio has OpenAI and also Meta and Mistral, even XAI. Google's Vertex is pulling in Claude alongside their own Gemini models. So even these cloud giants are saying, okay, one model is not enough. And Goose is where you see that reality tested out in the open, with contributors adding support as fast as these new models drop. And the truth is that the LLM landscape is kind of a mess right now. OpenAI drops a new responses API, and suddenly like half of the agent frameworks out there are broken overnight. Anthropic introduced a structured format to unify tool use, but then Gemini shipped their own flavor. Meta went a completely different route. So every provider has like their own different quirks, different message shapes, different tool calling signatures, different reasoning formats. And it's like The early days of the browsers, if any of you are old enough to remember that, but like same web, but you had to write your app like 3 different ways to make sure that it ran everywhere. So even these giants cannot avoid this pain. Microsoft Copilot, they started almost entirely on OpenAI. Y'all remember that? It was only a couple of years ago, but now they're pulling in Anthropic's Claude and others because no single provider is enough. And that diversification means that they too are paying this messy API tax. Right now, every provider thinks that they are the standard. And newsflash, none of them really are. So that's why these open, like multi-provider clients like Goose matter so much, because Goose doesn't pick a winner, you know? It keeps the door open for all providers, and that makes the entire ecosystem stronger. Okay, not only does Goose allow you to bring in any model you want, the client code is completely open source. So you as the user, you can evaluate exactly how your tokens are being used. And more importantly, you can influence it. In fact, we've merged several contributions from the open source community that directly improve the efficiency of how tokens are used. And I'd love to see more MCP clients offer this level of transparency and even maybe allow the community to contribute in making it better. And you know, this even encourages server developers to design for all models. I have a pet peeve where I see a server developer release a new MCP server and they're like, yeah, MCP server for X client, you know, fill in the blank. I think that is an anti-pattern, actually. That's not the intention of MCP. Server should be LLM and client agnostic. So we need to keep sight of this so that we don't end up in walled gardens. Now, by letting users use multiple models with Goose, the community quickly saw the need to be able to use different models even within a single session. Maybe they want a strong reasoning model to do the planning and then a less expensive model to carry out that execution. Great idea. Let's do it. Goose was one of the first agents to support this multi-model flow, and it's not limited to one provider. Users can use something like GPT-5 from OpenAI to do the brainstorming, come up with a really solid plan, and then have Goose automatically switch to something that's less expensive, like Gemini's 2.5 flashlight when it's time to get to work. And if the executing model happens to get stuck on a problem or something like that, Goose will automatically switch back to the brainy model, the planning model, so that it can figure out the solution and then automatically switch back to the worker model. So this feature helps end users save on token costs, which is great, right? We all love that. And we've since seen other clients adopt this pattern, this multi-model pattern. So this benefits users, this benefits the ecosystem overall. Now, when I say that clients determine what's possible, I don't just mean the features. I also mean safety. So think about it. The servers expose the tools. That might be APIs that write to your code base, or maybe pull data from a system, or even trigger workflows in production, right? That's a lot of power. And I'm sure I don't have to remind you all of the horror stories that we've seen over the past year around ill intentions, as well as some that are just innocent yet harmful mishaps. So who decides whether the agent should actually do something? The client does, right? The client is where permissions live. Where you get those confirmation steps, where the workflows should be executed responsibly. Like, help me, right? Don't let some malicious MCP server come and steal all of my passwords, for example. So this is where clients can really shine. In Goose, we just added prompt injection detection. So if a malicious input tries to trick the agent into leaking secrets or ignoring instructions, the client catches that, right? And Goose also provides tool level permission customization. So with any given MCP server, you get granular controls over every tool that's in that server. So you can set these to always run or always block or ask me first before running a specific tool. And that way you decide as the user how much autonomy you want to give to the agent and on which actions. So clients are not just the vehicle for how you use MCP. They're also now the seat belts and the airbags and even the brakes if you need them. So that's what makes all of this really safe while also being powerful. Now, I often say that this is the year of the terminal. Goose normalized the idea of agents being used as CLIs. And this broadened the mental model of what an agent can be. It proved that agents can do more than just code. They don't have to be boxed inside of your IDE. And this, again, opens up a new world of possibilities where agents are able to do things like interact with your file system. They can interact with your installed applications. They can run other CLIs, even agentic ones. Goose can invoke Claude Code, Gemini CLI, Codex CLI, and so on. And Goose was one of the first to introduce sub-agents to the MCP ecosystem. So this is a setup where a main agent such as Goose acts as an orchestrator, and it can delegate work to other agents that it controls. So Goose can spin up multiple instances of itself as sub-agents and then have them help it on a larger task. And this can, of course, speed up the overall process and keep each sub-agent focused on a very specific thing so it doesn't go off the rails or muddy up the main chat thread. And that also helps with your context window because each of those sub-agents will have its own. So I taught a workshop at Berkeley a couple of months ago where I demonstrated how to use Goose's sub-agent orchestration to spin up an entire team of AI agents to build a full application complete with tests and docs, and we did all of this in 1 hour. So we had a planner agent to define like the product vision and the scope of the MVP. We had a project manager agent break down the task and determine, how many sub-agents do we need and how can we execute them? Which ones can execute in parallel? Which ones need to be sequential and have a handoff? We had an architect agent that determined what the tech stack should be, set up the project structure, define the API contract so that the developer, both the front-end developers agent and the back-end developer agent could work in parallel, which they did. And then a QA agent who wrote tests and identified some production blockers, a tech writer agent to then write up the setup, the usage, the API details and stuff. Now, all of that was done with Goose sub-agents, but in the interest of choice and optionality, Goose can even spin up sub-agents from other MCP clients. Would you look at that? Agent to agent collaboration without inventing a whole new protocol. Who would have thought? Y'all supposed to laugh. All right. So MCP clients are also excellent at automating tasks. In fact, community members desire to turn these sessions into repeatable workflows that they could even share with others. So to address this, the Goose recipe feature was born, and recipes bundled together a system prompt, a user prompt, and then any of the MCP servers that are needed to complete the task, right? And that turns into like a mini agent that others can launch with a single click. You can save it within Goose and run it on demand, or you can even schedule it to run automatically. For example, I have a recipe that triages issues and PRs in the Goose GitHub repo once a week, right? I have this saved in my Goose desktop so I can run it at any time, but it's also scheduled to run every Sunday night so that when we get in on Monday, we kind of have all of this work prepared for us. And then I can even parameterize some things in that recipe. So if I wanted to share it with you all, I could just parameterize like the name of the repo so that you could use it, or any criteria that I'm using for triaging. So recipes are an early proof point that MCP isn't limited to these one-off tool calls, right? They showed us that agents can be used for reliable, reusable workflows, and I'm sure that this pattern will be adopted by more clients within the ecosystem. So the Goose team is really small. When we launched, we were only able to do so for Mac OS. And of course, the community immediately cursed us out for that. But that's the beauty of open source. After dragging us, they rolled up their sleeves and they fixed it. So the Windows and the Linux desktop versions of Goose were built by contributors who cared enough to make it real. And I love that because it means that Goose didn't just stay stuck at the pace of our small team, right? Suddenly, Goose could run everywhere, and it happened faster than we could have done ourselves. So that's what makes open source so powerful for agentic AI, right? It's a sandbox where the community experiments, they pressure test ideas, and they accelerate the entire ecosystem, pushing MCP forward in the process. So Goose doesn't need to be like the #1 client. That was never the goal. Block isn't in the business of selling AI agents. We open source Goose to prove a point. That openness matters. Goose is a living example of what's possible in agentic AI when you value things like access and transparency and choice. It pushes the conversation toward optionality instead of lock-in. And if nothing else, it sets the expectations that you as developers and consumers should demand as the ecosystem grows. So I don't share any of this talk to brag on how great Goose is, even though, yes, it is that girl. But I share it because Goose shows us how clients lead the way and how open source, once again, has advanced this entire space. So as we build the future of agentic AI together, don't just ask what an agent can do. There's going to be more that pop up. I want you to really think about it and test it out. Does it keep you free to choose, right? Because in the end, open isn't just where the trends start. Open is where the future belongs, all right? So if you're interested in Goose, you can download it with this QR code. We do have a booth if you want to rock a vibe code with Goose shirt. Go pick one up. Tell them Angie sent you. And we have a happy hour after the conference today. It's a 2-minute walk. Food and drinks on us, all right? Thank you all so much.